So I was actually going to make a video today about the things about the RPG genre that I hate. And as it turns out, that's kind of sounds like a bit of a downer of a topic. And in today's world as it is today, I feel like, I don't want to contribute any more negativity to that. I want to focus on the positivity of RPGs, as that tends to generally be where I have the most to say anyways. So let's just dive into the things that I love about the RPG genre, because honestly, I've been playing and reviewing RPGs straight, just nothing but RPGs, for like going on the last 9 years. So obviously, I've got to have a lot of things about the RPG genre that I love, and we're going to dive into those right now, starting with character progression, which is a very quintessential aspect of role-playing games. You're not the same character that you were at the very beginning of the game. You've gotten stronger. It always bugged me when I would play Mario 1. You were the same Mario at the beginning of Mario World 1-1, and at the end of Mario when you defeat Bowser in World 8-4, right? It was the same Mario. It made me feel back in the day like I was just wasting time. It was just really far away. It wasn't really getting any better, wasn't really becoming any stronger. He wasn't progressing. And that really bugged me about the Mario games. I get it now that it was the player who was progressing, but back in the day, I really loved that aspect of Zelda, A Link to the Past, when you could see that he would get heart pieces and he would get stronger and he'd get better weapons and stuff. And that's eventually what drew me into the RPG genre itself. That was the very big thing, the character progression. You weren't the same person at the end of the story as you were when you started at the beginning of the story. And I loved to see that. And that's something that RPGs do even better than action adventure games in more ways than one, because in addition to like the character progression, there's also character development. And so you're not just a much stronger person at the end of the game, you could potentially be a very different person at the end of the game as well. And that's something that I think that doesn't get explored as much. I would like to see that tackled more in certain games, because one of the limiting factors of that is when you have a silent protagonist, they can thereby have no character progression. We kind of talked a little bit about that during my Chrono Trigger review, but essentially not being able to have your protagonist be an actual character really precludes them from any sort of development. But at least your compatriots, 9 times out of the 10, will have some form of character development. And that's pretty nice. There are subgenres that lend themselves better to something like that. The Persona series has such a wide breadth of characters, and their development throughout the game is like it's built into the mechanics of like social links and stuff. And I really appreciate that about those games as well. Now, getting back to character development, or character progression rather, there is that whole aspect of getting better, and what really makes that possible is fighting enemies, getting stronger, leveling up, which inadvertently leads to the grind, which can be kind of off-putting for some people, but for some people, it's also actually a feature, not a bug. Grindiness sometimes can actually be a meditative process. And I know that that's going to be probably a divisive thing when I say that I love grinding in RPGs, because sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. It really comes down to, is the process of grinding in the game a fun loop? When I was grinding in Dragon Warrior 2, my God, that was some of the worst. I hated that. But I've recently been playing a lot of Shin Megami Tensei 5. There will be a review of that upcoming, and I did quite a bit of grinding in that game, and the grinding loop for that was actually a lot of fun. So I didn't really mind the grind too much. I actually played the game a lot between streams. Normally I stream everything that I'm about to review over on Twitch. You can find links to that in the description, but for the first time in a long while, I actually grinded between stream sessions because there was a lot of grinding to do, but also because it was fun to do. I really appreciated that. And there are some games that are like that, where I don't mind the grind, and sometimes it's even enjoyable. It just depends on the game and if the core mechanics are engaging enough. I suppose that's another thing that I can talk about is, when the battle systems are really engaging. I am a fan of when the turn-based RPG battle system has some sort of quirk to it, some sort of tweak to it. So the press turn battle system of SMT5 was pretty novel to me because I've not played a press turn battle system before, and this one was really fun, right? But also, it doesn't just have to be like the press turn battle system. Sometimes it can even just be a little twist on a classic system. So with Earthbound, you've got the spinning reels like a like a slot machine sort of thing going on where it counts down your hit point meter. And if you can heal or if you can defeat the enemy before that scrolls down to 0, a previously fatal attack wouldn't actually end up killing you, and you could recover before that happens. And I think that that's really cool. Dragon Quest XI had a similar system, or not a similar system to that, but it had a similar system to Dragon Quest, the stock standard turn-based system, and they introduced the pep up mechanics, which allowed you to use in certain circumstances some special moves, and that was engaging. So I feel like when you can take something that's pretty standard, but then just add your own little like twist on it, which is what a lot of RPGs kind of have been doing lately, it just kind of freshens the whole experience up a little bit, which isn't to say that I'm not a fan of the stock standard, bog standard, if you will, turn-based RPG combat that was invented practically in Dragon Quest, because I feel like Dragon Quest's standard turn-based system by itself is actually really good too. I really sometimes just love a very basic, straightforward, no frills combat system. There's something refreshing about kind of returning to the basics, and sometimes after especially like complicated, very engaging, very like mentally taxing RPG, sometimes it's fun to go back to like Pokemon or something like red, blue, yellow, and just not really have to like, you know, engage on that same level, to just be able to sit back and be like, oh yes, that's a rock type Pokemon, time to shoot it with my water gun. You know, something like that, where it's so intuitive and so familiar that you can just know exactly what to do. There are some times when I really appreciate that. This kind of ties into one of those things that I mentioned in that video about defeating your backlog, is that I like to alternate between complicated and easy, between sci-fi and fantasy, and basically variety is the spice of life that keeps you going, that keeps me engaged. And I love the fact that RPGs have such a wide variety of different ways to enjoy them, different things to explore. And the funny thing is that that whole thing about variety, that's not even something that I had written down prior to this. That's just something that I'm just going off on tangents, and it's like, oh yes, I love that. There's so much about RPGs that I do love. Man, the art of RPGs. I hadn't really experienced a whole lot of anime prior to like really getting into RPGs. So seeing some of that RPG art in Chrono Trigger, back before I was really into like Dragon Ball Z, was super neat. Seeing that in other uses, in like Breath of Fire on the Super Nintendo, because I had to emulate a lot of my first entry-level RPGs. I loved the art. I loved the almost tangible way. It looked like you could almost reach out and like feel the textures of like the environments. The Super Nintendo in particular had some incredible art that just really spoke to me at the time, and certain PlayStation 1 games as well. I think maybe that was because they were some of my first, and because of that, they just really like sparked they awakened some new love inside of my brain about the texture, the slick look of like black tile with slightly dampened, you know, like in the inside of like a sewer or something like that. The way that everything just felt so textured and intricately crafted, pixel by pixel. I loved that aspect of it. And I think that some of the pixel art of RPGs, even to this day, remains some of the best. The pixel art of Breath of Fire 4, for instance, is something that I still haven't seen done better anywhere else. The music is a whole other thing that, like, I have a video where we talked about the music of RPGs with Eric Ladd, and that was a really fun discussion that you should definitely check out, because he has such a better way of talking about music than I do. I feel like I just don't have the correct repertoire, the correct set of language to talk about how much I love the music of RPGs, but it doesn't speak to me the same as anywhere else. And I feel like a big part of that has to do with the way the game uses the music to further tell a story. Like, you can convey emotions through the music of the game. So you'll have these tracks that you can listen to later, and it'll tie back into those emotions that you felt when you were being told the story of the game. So in a way that the game designers have this very strict control over what song you hear and when at what point, and it's really able to help further control that story. Like, when you hear music just by itself, sometimes you don't really have a whole lot of context, and you can kind of pick up on a lot of emotional stuff. So I feel like that aspect of experiencing the music inside the context of an RPG just really helps give it a deeper connection. And that's one of the things that I just really love about the music of RPGs. Also, they're just written so beautifully in so many cases. I feel like a lot of today's best composers do their best work for video games. And I feel like the best ones who work on those video games do their best work in the context of RPGs. This honestly could probably go on to be like a 10-part series. So if you like this, please be sure to give it a like so I know that you liked it. And then if you liked it, also maybe consider subscribing. So if I do make another one, you'll see when it comes out. So until then, have a great day, everybody. Ow.